Hey guys, Aussie Expat here. So, let's cut to the chase. This will be unscripted. I've lost well north of $1 million.
Skill no discretion, your mind is a weapon. 11-11, it's time for progression. You could try to play, but you're never gonna beat me. Look the other way, what I'm doing ain't easy, bloody.
The exact number, yeah, it's more than $1 million. And I thought I'd reflect on it. Like, how many times do you get to say you've lost $1 million? It's a life experience. I'm more than comfortable sharing that, you know, most of my wealth is in the stock market. I don't really believe in many other types of investments, maybe a little bit of crypto, maybe a little bit of watches. Now, the everything bubble has imploded and we're seeing all asset prices tumble. We're seeing the value of money also tumble relative for what it is. And there's no real safe haven right now. You say it's cash, but you know, 8% or 9% on your cash is not a very good idea to lose. It's almost guaranteed. So we're in some pretty wild times here. Now, it's no secret to anyone holding any sort of asset in the last 2 years, they've all appreciated substantially. So in my book, it's kind of expected, easy come, easy go. And the reality is I've been expecting this for quite a long time. My game plan has never been to try and spot out and then try to sell out and so forth. I always figured the next big crash, and the first one I really experienced myself was 2007, 2008. I was working in London and Switzerland financial industry at the time. Those are very specifically hit very hard. And I learned quite a lot of things going through that. And one is it's very hard to pick the bottom. Very, very hard. And if you accumulate assets through a career like I have, it's going to be very difficult to sell because you've made a lot of gains on these things, you're going to incur taxes. It's just a difficult position. And maybe a lot of people would have been spooked back in 2020 March where we had that big dip. And if you sold then, you would have missed out on all of these gains. So I didn't sell, I bought a little bit. And what Warren Buffett says is you gotta look for when everyone is fearful and then be greedy. And it's almost a cliche because the real devil is in the details. You have to have the cojones, the balls of steel required right when everything is going to absolute crap and nobody agrees that things could ever be better again, to then start pulling the trigger on buying. I've always planned to hopefully be that guy, so I've got a little bit of powder dry, but it's going to take years to get out of this muck. I mean, quite frankly, what's happened in the last 2 years through COVID, every government has gotten this very wrong. We've all been at their mercy. I've not been unscrupulous enough to do things like I hear, like buying gold Rolexes with PPI money and stuff like that. But, you know, that's the game in this world, is that governments will pick winners and losers. A lot of these stocks are just correcting. The S&P 500 is verging on close to 20% down. Any single stock of any popularity has gone down much further than that. Crypto is like at 50% from its peaks, although most of my accumulation of crypto occurred even before the last boom and bust, so I'm not really too worried about those assets. The really hard decisions to make now are things like, on the stocks that were true losers, things like Peloton or Coinbase, could they ever make up, you know, could they ever come back? And, you know, is there any sort of bounce that's going to come into effect, or are these really just crippled companies? You look at, say, Cisco from the dot-com era. Cisco became the #1 company in the world, and they've barely started to regain the stock price that they were back then, now with massive dilution compared to market cap. Like, they've never returned. The reality is, the individual stocks, some of these will never come back. Pulling the trigger now and saying sell or not sell, quite frankly, I've never really thought about it. And luckily, I don't have too much of my portfolio in individual stocks. I've always advised and taken my own advice, just VOO, that's Vanguard's S&P 500 ETF, just VOO, and forget about it. over the next few years, we could see a long downtrend. So that's the funny thing about these like bear markets, is that some of them could be over in 6 months, some of them 18 months. So I think the last one, 2007, 2008, it actually bottomed out after about 18 months from top to bottom. And then from the previous one was actually from 2000, 2003, so 3 years. So you need to be solvent for 3 years. And that would only be looking at the last two downturns. You go back to the 80s, crash of 87, I think that was actually very short. I think it was from top to bottom, it was only like 3 months. You really need to be looking at the long haul. There's a reasonable movie called Margin Call where it said there were 3 rules to win. It was be first, be smarter, or cheat. And they knew that they weren't smarter and they didn't have a way to cheat out of it. Maybe they did post-trade. They were first. So if you sell first, they're talking about calling tops, basically, being the first to recognize when things are going to shit and just dump everything. And that's what has... I think you're too late for that. You've already seen S&P 500 down 20%. I think if you're on the verge of retirement, you probably still, maybe you should exit if you really wanted to retire in the next year, because this could take quite a long way to get out. Because we're not talking about just stock market bouncing in terms of valuations. We're talking about fixing inflation. That doesn't happen quickly. That's like 5+ year journey. This all being said, the stock market tends to bake in all of its losses really quickly and then start recovering before actual recovery. So it's always forward looking. So you could see price increases relatively quickly, even though the real economy has not actually started going back up. But I don't think we've really started to see the most of the hurt yet. If we're just talking 2008, S&P 500 should go to the low 2000 range. It's currently at like 4,000, so there's a long way it could go. So ultimately, I've been prepared for this, prepared not to look at the portfolio price, even though that is the amount of money I've lost, north of 1 million. But execution's a bitch. I mean, my strategy, I'm supposed to be dollar cost averaging into this market, and I have started pulling the trigger a little bit, nothing dangerous. Mostly because, one, the market is actually down, and there isn't a single analyst out there. There's no one, absolutely nobody saying things are going to be good from here, right? That's kind of precisely the time you need to be willing to pull the trigger. And while even I don't agree that the market is at its bottom, you have to buy. I mean, that's the historical thing. The flip side is maybe what we're seeing is not actually historic. Maybe it's not a repeat of history. Maybe it's something new. Maybe these prices go down and they never come back. It's always possible. Would that imply that the economy never comes back? No, well, I mean, maybe the next generation of value is created outside of things that are publicly listed. It's never happened before, but things unprecedented, you can't, this is your life on the line ultimately. You can't say, well, I would have been rich if only for X. Like, no one's going to have any sympathy for that. It's you holding your money. You're making the bet for yourself and your family. We're going to start seeing some actually really rough times if people didn't have them already during COVID. And I feel for everyone that's struggling. I worked throughout the last financial crisis. I hope to have good, stable employment through this one, just so that you can sit in these positions and not have to worry about it. If you have to liquidate, you're forced to liquidate. I'm really sorry, but there'll be another chance. There'll be another chance to work at this and go at it again. This is only money at the end of the day. Easy come, easy go. There's no fate. It's just a game. You just enjoy it. If you can't live with the downward slopes, don't be betting, basically. Don't be in that game. If you can't live with the outcomes, use something safer. Get those Treasury Direct I bonds. They're returning 9% right now. In fact, everyone should do it. I mean, that's free alpha. After losing north of 1 million, the watches still bring me as much value as they did. And we've seen capitulation in the watch market. David SW for the first time priced down a Panda Daytona. So the one they've got listed is now at 44,000 instead of 52,000. So they've started to capitulate. You're seeing the actual big name dealers reducing prices on some of these watches. Some of the, not Daytonas went down, some went up. I think the Hulk went from 32 to 29. That didn't lose much. It's like 10% on a pretty friggin' high price. And in general, I'm thinking 2019 prices for everything should be well within everyone's range of expectation, as in all of the boom through COVID, just erase it and just look at what prices were in 2019 for every asset, quite frankly. And that shouldn't be too painful. Rewind the clock 2 years. 2019 was not a bad year. So I expect, the Hulk wasn't discontinued then, so the Hulk is a little bit of an outlier. If you rewind the clock, I'm going to guess the Hulk ends up at the 20K mark, potentially. Daytona's a little bit special. I think some of its price increase will stick. So you're not going to see 2019 prices exactly, where you're talking about numbers starting with a 2. But certainly 32,000 is totally possible, sort of rewinding the clock back to sort of like mid-20 to late 2020, mid-2021. So $30,000 should be a target that I wouldn't be too surprised if the Panda hits. We're already seeing white gold Daytonas selling on eBay for about $40,000. Those are full bracelets, so those are, I think, technically under retail for those. Now, you're obviously getting used, but that's fair. So just in general, all assets are correcting, but I'm enjoying my watch as much as I ever did. The value of the watch never subtracted or added to the enjoyment of those watches. So going forward, I still plan to acquire the rest of my Grail collection, that being the Explorer 2 and then something on gold on Oysterflex, hopefully a Daytona. From there, whatever else comes, I hope vintage comes down a little bit. Now, vintage didn't see unbelievable price appreciation on most models, but some did. So for example, the 16750 and 16750 Pepsis, those received a lot of price inflation. You're talking going from numbers under 10,000 to numbers well over 10,000. So I think that numbers under 10,000 should be plausible again once this shakes out. But it could take quite a while. There's just a lot less floating circulation of vintage Rolexes for there to be a lot of price finding and new trades and comparison prices to get these out. The deals will come. The dealers are starting to capitulate. Maybe they've offloaded enough inventory to de-risk and they can start being dealers again, buying and selling at market rates, which will be significantly lower than where they were last month. At the end of the day, I'm still happy. I have a great relationship with my AD. I hope to continue that in the future, and hopefully a little less competition, because there aren't as much incentive for flippers to be taking inventory. And the next steps from here are like having the balls to hold and buy through a bear market. Now I've been sitting on Bitcoin for a while, so I'm pretty inoculated to any bad feelings when losses occur. So 1 million plus doesn't bother me. And look, even if I lost literally everything financially, I still have my head, meaning I always have capacity to earn, and I've got 2 lovely children and a beautiful wife. So there's really nothing the financial markets can do that'll make me unhappy. All the best to you. Please like and subscribe. I'm going to try and keep up to date on exactly the prices going forward on these watches as dealers start capitulating. There might even be some that I'm interested in. These are getting so close to retail that maybe on some of them you shouldn't wait. Until next time, see you around.
Just kill no discretion, your mind is a weapon. 11-11, it's time for progression. You could try to play, but you're never gonna beat me. Look the other way, what I'm doing